Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. We are we're fresh into the off season. Not a lot of like free agent stuff, but the draft stuff is really kicked off. And so, who better to have on than someone who's been to the Shrine Bowl, to the Senior Bowl practices, than Arif Hasan. Arif, man, thank you for joining. Yeah, you haven't been ripping it up at Veets, have you?
No, actually, I only had one opportunity to go down to Veets, and I was like, I'm old now, so I was like tired. I was like, hey man, I've been like, because I was up till like 2 a.m. every night after the Shrine practices at a place very similar to Veets, but in Dallas. and then and then here, everyone's like, hey, we got to go out to Veets, and I'm like, I got to go to bed, and so that's what I did. I'll
That's
probably
fair.
do Veets tonight though.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, practice is done, and you don't
Yeah.
really need to wake up for too much tomorrow. Probably, maybe some more shows.
Yeah, that's basically it. I got like podcasts lined up, and I put all of those later, so I don't got to worry about that.
That's smart. That's a smart
Perfect.
man. So obviously the Vikings, with limited draft capital this year, it's gonna be tough to address every need in the draft. But we do have some pretty glaring positions. I think interior offensive line, pretty much anywhere in the trenches. The secondary. So where were your eyes this week during practice, and who kind of stood out to you? Maybe we'll just start general, and maybe we can focus in on positions after.
Yeah, I mean, because for most of my life covering the Vikings, heading down here into the Shrine Bowl, they've always needed offensive linemen. So I've always just I just gravitate towards them, and now it's become like a habit. It's like, oh, one-on-ones, yeah, I'll let the other reporters do the flashy wide receiver DB stuff. I don't care. But obviously, the Vikings need a defensive back, but I'm still like heading all the way over to the offensive line, defensive line one-on-ones, and I don't know. That's just like more fun to me.
Sure.
That's just like a personal thing. But yeah, so I've been heading over there, and both in Shrine and in Senior, and it's been like fun getting to kind of know some of these guys, right? Because I haven't been doing a ton of draft work heading in, so I'm going in fresh. So I see a guy flash, and I'm like, who is that guy? And they're like, oh, that's a UDFA. You don't got to worry about him. Or like, oh, that guy's going in the first round. You don't got to worry about him, right? It's just like, oh yeah, the Vikings not getting him, right? So like, it's been fun. But like Zeke Biggers from Georgia Tech flashed a little bit. I think he got hurt by the end, but he was really excellent here. The Syracuse edge, I'm forgetting names because I'm seeing helmets and numbers, right? The
Yeah.
Syracuse edge over at the Shrine Bowl was outstanding, and like a ton of hustle too. Like I know like it's always kind of tired to talk about that kind of thing, but in team drills, a lot of times when the edge rusher like gets the sack, they just like stop, which makes sense. I'm not going to knock anyone for stopping after they win the play, right? But in drills, they don't stop the play. The edge rusher stops because he's done his job. The play is over for him, right? But the play continues, right? And so, the quarterback's like throwing it to a wide receiver, and he just like books it from the backfield where he's already sacked the quarterback, and he just like books it all the way down the field to this like running back on a wheel route who's like 20 yards downfield, and he's like the second defender to touch him.
Yes.
Like it's just like a ton of hustle. So I really appreciate that kind of stuff because it's just like this guy obviously just loves what he's doing.
Yeah.
There's a Division III guard who was playing a ton of center snaps because he's a little undersized. Named Thomas Perry from Middlebury, which is like a school in Vermont. Primarily known for like its language programs. Like it's like an interesting kind of, I'm shocked to have a football program kind of thing. And yeah, he was just like a crazy find. His parents like sent his film out to like Duke Manyweather. Manyweather was
cool.
like, well, this is good. Yeah. It's like, this is good, but like, who are you? Right. And so he invites him out for like a 4-week probational, like, I'll train you. I got you with like Willie Lampkin and some of these other draft prospects. I got NFL guys that I'm training and stuff like that. And after the 4 weeks, Duke was like, yeah, you're good. And he starts like sending out his workout film and stuff like that. He almost made Bruce Feldman's freak list this year. He was like, like a top
High
5
honors.
honorable mention kind of thing. And people here telling me like, Kent Platt's like RAS.
Yeah.
They're telling me they expect him to hit a 10.0, right? Which like I think RAS is like, whatever. I've written about kind of why I'm kind of skeptical of it, but just as a general, like this is how athletic this guy is.
Yeah.
And it shows up, right? And he was winning a ton of reps against like real like good athletes, right? Like I think Jordan Phillips was the only guy that really got the better of him. He was doing really well. And then after practice, he would sneak out the back. I was the only one that caught him doing this. He would sneak out the back and he'd just start running 40s. Like just this guy. So I like him. Those guys stood out. I think just generally speaking, Max Brosmer, actually, Minnesota guy, I didn't expect him to be the best quarterback at Shrine, but I think he was. Like him and Kyle McCord were like head and shoulders above everybody else there. That was really nice to see. Talk about like Vikings needs. Cal cornerback Noel Williams looked excellent. So I kind of want to shout that out. But yeah, Senior Bowl. There's not a ton of quarterback talent here, so it's been kind of tough to evaluate the wide receivers and the DBs. But from a wide receiver perspective, TCU's Jack Besh, who's wearing his brother's number. His brother died like in the terrorist attack in New Orleans. So he's like honoring him. But he's also like playing really well. Like it's it feels like you're obligated to mention that first part of the story, but like he's playing like really outstanding football right now, and I kind of wanted to point that out because he's been a ton of fun to watch. DLDB, it's been kind of hard to get a good look because mostly I'm just schmoozing, right? But every so often I'm taking a look. Walter Nolan's popping off. I think he's looked great. Shamar Stewart is crazy. He's so good. He's like, to me, I don't know how good any of these guys are, right? Heading in. To me, he's the best guy here. And when I say that, they're like, close enough, right? And I'm like, okay, great. Like sounds like he's a first round guy. So, and he looks like it. So there have been some fun things from him. The Ole Miss edge rusher, Princely, I thought he looked good until, I think at the end of practices, he's like, I've done my part. I'm not going to. Okay. So at the end of practice, he's looking great, but he looks pretty good here. Along the offensive line, it's not the defensive line group here, which I'm told is true for the class, is insane. It's outstanding how good they are. The offensive line group here is just not keeping up. Josh Connerly here was really good. I was supposed to expect a lot out of the Purdue guy, Embo. I haven't seen a ton out of him here. Same out of the West Virginia guy, who they've been moving around, so that might be part of why.
That NDSU guy, the interior offensive lineman.
Yeah.
I've seen him buzzing on Twitter.
Literally, he might be an interior one. Like he was so good this week.
I hate admitting it. He was good. Okay, but this practice he was bad. So day one, day two, day two, I have to admit he looked pretty good. Now the track record of NDSU guys in the NFL is really bad. Okay, so just want you all to know that. But day one, day two, he looked good. Day three, he struggled a little bit more today.
I got a side question. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was watching a rep that he had. Who was the Peebles? Is that the D tackle out of Virginia Tech? Who also flashed a lot this week and just his pass rush. And they just went back and forth like 3-4 reps on where they're like, hey, again. And it's like Zebo wasn't giving anything up. So I'm like, all right, well, he has my attention now. So I started watching him the rest of that practice. And then day two, I didn't get to see much of day three today because work. But it's been fun to watch him.
This is going to go a little bit maybe tangenty for you, Arif, but I have to pick your brain on this because I feel like analytically you just understand that part of the game so well, along with everything else. But with the Vikings' need at interior offensive line, there have been fans talking about spending a lot of money in free agency on them or spending high draft capital on them. And I just want to get your opinion on, like, is the value even there to do either of those things? Like, because when you think of like wins above replacement at positional value, is interior offensive line even something you would consider like spending a first round on maybe this NDSU kid or throwing the bag at Trey Smith in free agency?
It's tough because I think, first of all, you take a look at, who's competing in the Super Bowl and who were the top seeds in this year's playoff, and they've invested a lot in their offensive line. The only one in the conference championship game that didn't seem to have that kind of investment was Washington, right? And when you're hitting like 3 out of 4 on a particular, approach, or if you want to include Detroit, 4 out of 5, right? Then, it feels like there's something there. But we also got to note that like Washington has a really well-respected offensive line coach. We know that, the Philadelphia Eagles have a really respected offensive line coach, like maybe the best one we've seen since the previous Eagles offensive line coach, Howard Mudd, which come on, right? Share the wealth, right? Exactly. But like that's part of it too. But it's hard to ignore that they've made these really significant investments, and so it is possible that teams like the Rams, like the Vikings, have overcorrected and underinvested in this position, or when they have made their rare investments, they haven't really worked out. Because Garrett Bradbury counts as an investment. LSU guard who's Ed Ingram. Sorry, there's like an Ingram here, right? Ed Ingram, who second round pick or close enough. That counts as an investment. It didn't work out. They had a number of third round pick investments that didn't work out. So I'm not saying that they didn't invest, but they missed on their investments. But they're not taking a lot of shots. Like some of these teams are taking. You take a look at how the Chiefs constantly took investments across their offensive line. They traded and signed and drafted and they eventually got their best 5 plus a pretty good 6, right? Which is the Eagles also have Steens, right, as their 6, right? That's not a bad place to be. I know you love
draft pick too, right? Like a second.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. I know you love me talking about the Eagles offensive line because of all those Sooners, but yeah,
only one, right? There's only one.
Well, no, I mean, they get backups every so often from there too. But yeah. But I think.
And you're talking Chiefs, Creed Humphrey. He should be on our team if people listen to me ever. But
yeah. No, he's a left-handed center. You can't do it.
Can't do it.
Gosh.
But yeah, so I think that there's something to be said that they've been under-investing or maybe just missing on their investments. But I do think that you can over-index on that because you take a look at those teams and it's also, their quarterback is good. They generally have good receivers except for the Chiefs who have the best quarterback, right? They're good at a lot of positions. That's why they're there. So you don't want to over focus on one element and say that that's the reason that they're there. They've got great coaching. They've got great passing. That's an element, right? So I think that that's something to kind of, remind ourselves of. And then we also got to think what resources are we sacrificing when we do that? Because if we're sacrificing a linebacker, I get it. That makes sense to me analytically that you'd rather have a guard than a linebacker. But a cornerback, I don't know. Maybe that cornerback is better, especially if he can stay healthy, right? So there's that. When you talk to some of these analytics people about the investment, they'll say stuff like, generally speaking, it's a bad idea. But Quentin Nelson, for the first couple of years of his career, broke that a little bit. His wins above replacement for his contract was a positive. And so he was a good investment, despite being the 6th overall pick at guard. So there are exceptions to this. You just have to be so confident in your capacity to identify that exception, right? That you can. Creed Humphrey, it vastly outplayed his pick slot, even after you account for the quote unquote low value of his position, right? So there are players who do that. And we've seen that for the Vikings too. Nose tackle Linval Joseph had a positive wins above replacement, even though non-pass rushing nose tackles generally do not do that. It is a bad investment, generally speaking. So there are exceptions to these. It is difficult for you to be able to identify who those exceptions are going to be beforehand, but you do find them, right? So I don't want to be totalizing on that, but I do think probably second round, third round, you're probably fine, especially because hey, we're talking about Cam Jurgens of the Eagles, right? Second round pick. I'm talking about Creed Humphrey, second round pick. So it doesn't have to be a first round pick, but you do have to pay attention because you can't be below average there.
You can't be taking swings at Dakota Dozier every year.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't throw the position away. You don't have to be signing 20. Not everybody has to get Joe Thuney, right? You can't be signing below average guys and hoping that works out. You have to at least get to average, and then every additional dollar you spend above that, maybe you're not getting the value that you want out of that.
Sure. Well, if you shift it back to kind of go back to the Senior Bowl route here, but even having a better run game would help maybe some of that interior offensive line play, and that'll lead me to the running backs because I know there's some guys there at the Senior Bowl this week that Ryan and I particularly like. I know Ryan is a big Ollie Gordon fan, and I know that Donovan Edwards had a good week too. Anybody else that kind of stood out, or anything you want to elaborate on those two players?
It's so difficult to evaluate the running backs here. It's practice,
pass
right?
Pro.
Running backs.
You pro
well, you do get
reps.
pass pro. I want to say the guy who surprised me most in pass pro was Marcus Yarns, right?
Okay.
I was like, yeah, okay, because Yeah, Delaware. Like I did at first, because I don't know these guys. At first, I thought it was Michigan. I had to look at my roster because I got the same helmet. But I was like, "Hey, that Michigan back's doing good." And people are like, "Who are you talking about?" Because the Michigan backs are on the other team, and so I was like, "They look pretty good." But Marcus Yarns looked pretty good, which I thought was surprising. Devin Neal, I think everyone expected him to look good in pass pro, and he did. So I'll give him that. But yeah, I don't love the Donovan Edwards.
Okay.
And that's just a tape thing for me because obviously we watched a lot of JJ McCarthy last year. And I watched a little bit of Donovan Edwards this year. Again, I didn't prepare a ton, but he didn't explode for me. But I think that just generally speaking, like Damian Martinez is really good in pass pro, and he's big, so but like he loves it. He loves to hit people, which is like a fun, thing to see at a practice and stuff like that. But yeah, just in terms of
watching like one of his games, or actually it was multiple of his games, just doing some research here, and yeah, he loves contact, whether he's running, whether he's pass pro, like he's just looking for contact. And what's great about it is he bounces off a lot of it and gains additional yards. So I'm hoping to see like a good 40 time for him, but I don't know what that's going to look like. Yeah. In his limited opportunities.
Well enough. Yeah, right. Sure, it's like, he can catch enough, right? He's better than Adrian Peterson at catching, right? So if that's the bar we want to use. Yeah. I'm curious about Ollie Gordon because again, I don't know anything. It sounded like, based off what people were telling me, that this was like a really disappointing year for him. Yeah. Relative to kind of his last good in like 23, not even last year. But he's a guy that should have the tools. Sometimes you lose the tools and you don't get it back. Sometimes you do. So that's something that'll be kind of interesting. I know that I didn't actually see any of his runs here in practices, but Tootin, the Virginia Tech running back, kind of broke the chips in terms of his play speed here. So that's always going to catch some people's eyes. So I don't know. Like the running backs are just a very difficult. The only running backs and linebackers are generally difficult. And of those two groups, the only person that's really popped for me is Jack Kaiser, the Notre Dame linebacker, who has been crazy good in practices this week. Like I saw the practice yesterday and the practice today, and I asked about it. Apparently they won also outstanding practices. And the same thing was true for the Miss linebacker, Chris Paul at Shrine. Again, these guys typically don't stand out, linebackers or running backs. They typically don't stand out in these practice environments. But Chris Paul and Jack Kaiser, outstanding work, which you don't usually get to say about these positions.
That's great. I mean, it's just tough though with I wish we could draft a ton of them, right? Now I kind of wish we had the Spielman approach of multiple draft picks on day 2 and 3.
Don't trade down in day 1. Don't worry about it. We'll give someone a Christian Watson. It's fine.
Yeah. I hope that's all we give them. Ryan, any other positions or players you want to call out here?
Yeah, no, just the D tackles, like you said, it looked like they were popping, and obviously the hot name is Walter Nolan, and I've watched his tape. He looks explosive and a phenomenal run defender. But let's just hypothetically say we go a different route first round, whether it's a corner or whatever. There was some depth that there. It seemed like there's a lot of guys playing really well at the Senior Bowl. I think who was it? Was it Alexander, Darius Alexander from Toledo? He kept popping. Is there any names that you can think of that were maybe smaller schools and or kind of mid-round prospects that we potentially could be looking at in the the third or the fifth that we have?
And if you're talking corners, I prefer they be above 6 feet because we need height in that room.
Maybe
we need players and height in that room.
If we're talking if we avoid the edge rushers, right? Because Mike Green looked great, great. Mike Green looked great. I mean, the people that we mentioned, like Walter Nolan and Shamar Stewart, they look good. But I don't know. It's tough because it's a really difficult offensive line room. I know Norman Lott looked pretty good to a lot of people.
That's my guy. Did you like what you saw out of him?
I didn't see a ton of him, right? Because I'm looking around, but he caught a lot of people's attention here. I mean, it's kind of tough to isolate some of these individual people just because the offensive line has been struggling so much out of even Emory Jones, right? Who a lot of people we're pretty excited about. He had an up and down day, and also he and Shamar Stewart like just hate each other like genuinely deep in their souls, and I love seeing that. And so they keep on lining up against each other, and he had a better day against Shamar Stewart today. So yeah, I mean, like it's just a really great group, and it feels like you can't really go wrong with a lot of these defensive tackles. You're talking about corners a little bit. Jacob Parrish from Kansas State has looked really outstanding. It's difficult because when you take a look at the 1-on-1s or even the 7s, the receivers are taking forever, and this has been going viral now. The receivers are taking forever to get into their routes, which makes it really difficult to evaluate these cornerbacks who are just getting absolutely cooked because no one is allowed to put pressure on the quarterback. And it's like, well, yeah, if you take 8 seconds to get into your route, of course the corner is going to lose. That's not on the corner. But even within that environment, Jacob Parrish has looked good. The Florida State cornerback, Azaria Thomas has looked, he's looked really great. And he also like doesn't like fall for what the receivers are, is just like, if you're like doing the salsa at the line of scrimmage and you're Thomas and you're just like not reacting, it looks especially silly. And, he comes away with like picks and pass deflections. I was talking to a Florida State guy down here. I was like, hey man, this guy's like he's been getting a ton of picks in practice. How many picks do you have this year? And he goes 2. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, but he got a ton of picks at Florida State practices too. So I think this is a skill set he has. And he just like didn't get a ton of opportunities to actually grab picks. And I was like, yeah, man, I guess, but I feel like you got to do it in games. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But like,
hey, maybe they didn't throw his way a lot. Who knows?
Right. It could be that. It could be like a Sauce Gardner kind of thing, right? Like they were throwing there's another corner named Kobe Bryant. They were throwing Kobe Bryant's way at Cincinnati. Which is how he won the Thorpe Award. I don't know, man. It's these awards. But but yeah, and then going back to the Shrine, Kobe Bryant, who won Practice Player of the Week for his team, was having just such an obviously outstanding session in the 2 practices that he was healthy for, that they gave it to him. And he's incredible. And he was like really upbeat, positive the whole time. Good. Not to the receivers. He gave him an earful, but he was like really hyping up all the other DBs. It was pretty awesome. So
do you remember how much he clocked in at in terms of like weight? Because I remember like looking at his profile, looking at his tape, and I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty good. And then I looked at his like his measurables. I'm like, 165 pounds or 171 or whatever it was. Jeez. I'm like, guy, he's really light.
Yeah, he's 5'11" too, so he's not even like a 5'9", 171. He's 5'11", 171. And I mean, he hits kind of hard. I guess I'll give him that. But like that's what we heard about Cam Dancer too. It's like, he hits really hard. I mean, he might be skinny, so you do gotta watch out. But I like,
and again, size doesn't always matter. You look at that center from North Carolina, and he's taken on a guy who's 7-8 inches taller than him and 70 pounds heavier, and stonewalled him. Like,
Willie Lampkin. Apparently he played guard for the whole year at North Carolina. They're trying him out at center because he's 5'11". Like you're probably not in the NFL, but if you are, this is where you are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's possible that his agency was like, hey, you might need to be a fullback in the NFL, and so he started losing weight. And he shows up to the scene. Yeah, I can't confirm that. That's my understanding based off of like conversations people are speculating on. But he weighed in less at the Senior Bowl because he was just like a last minute ad. He didn't have like time to prep. As a last minute add to the Senior Bowl, he weighed less than his listed weight in North Carolina. I talked to somebody who covers North Carolina, and it was like, no, he actually weighed at his listed weight, which, as you know, is kind of a rarity in college football. He weighed at his listed weight because they wanted to get his weight up, so they like weighed him every day because he's playing guard, right, at a Power 4 conference. And he's here at like 270 whatever, and like you mentioned, like Darius was it? No, it's not
Deion Walker.
Deion Walker, yeah, 6'7", this giant guy. He's holding his own against him. Like he gets walked back 1-2 steps, and then he just like lifts the pads up right into the guy's face, and now he can't move. Like, okay, great, excellent work.
Damn.
There was a moment in run blocking where Lampkin's up against Walker, and he gets like a step or two, and Walker's like, I'm done playing this game, and he just kind of like moves him aside. He's like, okay, you had your fun. But in pass pro, he's doing really excellently. which and he's been pretty fun. He's a really good mover. And so he's been getting up to the second level in the run game, which is kind of fun. And at that point, it's really more about angles than anything else. And he seems to have a good understanding of that. I don't think he gets drafted, but it could be like a Puna Ford situation where it's like you're 5'10", you're 280 or whatever. I don't know if you're any good. And then the Seahawks grab him undrafted free agency, and he's killing it. He made the team. And that might be kind of what Willie Lampkin has to go through because there's no model for the kind of player that he is in the NFL.
Sure. I do got to jump here a little early. So again, appreciate your time. I just got to get my kid to orthodontist. My last question was just around the safety. So obviously we have a need at corner, but we currently only have one safety on staff right now. Right. So anyone stand out, maybe a particular Sooner that maybe stood out that looked pretty good this week?
I've not been looking at the safeties too much, man. I can't help you.
I can answer the question. He definitely had a couple of good pass breakups and an interception. But anyway, anyone else that maybe stood out?
Both the Elijahs over at the Shrine Bowl. Elijah Clark at Syracuse, Elijah Hussey at North Carolina. The North Carolina one did get injured, I think, at the second practice, but he's like a safety nickel because he's a shorter guy. But he loves contact, it seems like. And so you kind of like it. And they both were doing a really good job taking good angles. Arizona State's safety, Shamari something. Again, I apologize for not knowing their full names. He did a really excellent job for our practices today. They did line him up at outside corner just to see if he could do it. And the answer is no. But it's good to try, right?
Yeah, got to do it here.
But he's got really excellent closing speed when the ball's in the air. You could see that. Again, the Shrine, none of the quarterbacks, but the Shrine quarterbacks outside of Rosemer didn't really have a huge arm. So when you're seeing that deep pass, you see somebody with good closing speed. You do kind of have to have some context, like, well, maybe him closing down on that ball doesn't mean as much as maybe like an NFL speed. But from what I saw, I thought that was pretty good. Sounds like the Oklahoma State. Is it Billy Bowman? Like who are we talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, Billy Bowman.
Sure. I'm sure you got some good stats in practice. I didn't see them, so I can't. but yeah, it's a pretty decent safety group. What I'm asking around, because you're right. Like the Vikings have one safety, because even Theo Jackson is a restricted free agent, right? They've got one safety on the roster. I did ask around. It seems like it's an average to above average safety class. Probably no one at the top, right? No like Derwin James type guy. But, people think that the corner class is pretty similar. Like, it's not a weak class, but it's not the highlight of the class or anything like that. So you could probably find some answers to problems in this draft, especially if you trade down in the first and second round to grab a couple of extra picks, and you can get to the bottom of the second and grab some of these guys.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm going to run. I'll let you guys finish up. Thank you, Arif. It's always a pleasure. We'll have to get some beers here sometime soon.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Sweet. See you, Ryan. Yeah, that's really, I think we kind of hit all the positions. I don't have a ton more questions. And the funny thing is will we even draft any of the guys we just mentioned?
Right? Yeah. Who's to say, right?
That's the funny thing about the draft stuff is like you just spend all offseason learning about these guys, and they'll take the one you didn't look at, and then you're just in square one having to watch them all over again. So, but I do appreciate.
Yeah, you. And
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just I just remember the tall corner comment got me because I was like, I really like Trent. He's too small, Arif. And, the Chiefs get him. And, of course, he plays out of his mind. And it's just like, well, you don't even know what the team's prototypes are for you to be able to, unless it's like a Green Bay situation where they've got this long draft history where they don't take any corners below 6 feet tall. So we know exactly who we're looking at. I don't know if the Vikings even have these shorter corners on their radar versus they do, but they, knock them or whatever. And so it's not just that they may not even take the guy and you got to do it over again. You might have been doomed from the jump on some of these guys. You just didn't know it because what these teams are prioritizing for their systems.
Yeah. It's crazy, but it's fun. It's why we do this. And I'm sure we'll have many more conversations about tons of draft prospects as we continue through February, March, and into April. So, like Ryan said, I know we've talked about it. We'll get some beers when you're back here in Minnesota, but we'll let you enjoy home once you're finally back. But thank you for hopping on today. Enjoy Veets tonight, and Yeah. Thank you again. And for everybody watching, hit like and subscribe. We'll be back with some more content next week. We got some special guests continuing to roll down the pipe here. So a lot more to come. But until next time, Skol Vikes.